Are you still with us, Isaac? Okay. We'll go on to Mike. I think the same question that we recently went over with Graham. What is your call to action for Canadians related to social purpose real estate?
Before I say that, I want to answer the previous question. I have spoken to a number of women of color who work in the development industry, particularly the construction industry. And I won't repeat the stories, but they're endless. First, women have trouble in the construction industry, and if their skin color is not white, they have twice as many problems. So it's clear, it's there, it's built into the system. It'll be very hard to get out. The way out is Black controlled businesses showing people that they can do just as well, if not better. But that takes time. Sorry, go back to your question now, because my head got so focused on that.
Thank you for sharing your insights. The question is, what is your call to action for Canadians related to social purpose real estate?
Well, to those who own property, as I stuck in the chat, there's no excuse anymore for social purpose real estate to go in and back to the private sector. There are plenty of players, ourselves included, that will pay fair market value for the land. The minute you can get fair market value for the land, then what's the purpose of trying to get the same price out of the development industry that will usually pay you a bit less? So that's one call to action. The other call to action is that if we're successful with our funding for the co-op sector we're trying to create, there will be room for everybody to get active and involved. There will be no impact on scale. You will be able to operate at whatever scale you can operate at. And we have the techniques, to just give you an example, find people who care. Just find people who care. I was able to tie up 36 acres with an 83-year-old farmer because all he wanted to do was help the town, but he didn't want to give up the money that his land was worth because he was trying to support his grandchildren. But he still tied up a piece of land for 3 years, a $27 million piece of land with a $1,000 deposit, simply because he cared. So at some level, you're looking for partners who care, regardless of whether it's private sector, nonprofit sector, anywhere. And if you find partners who don't care, move on to a partner who cares, and you'll save yourself a lot of grief in life.
Makes sense. Now, you mentioned 150 million for Lawrence Heights in the chat. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes. So the model that we're using turns the community of future owners into the developer. So we form a cooperative corporation composed of the future owners of the buildings that it's building. So in the case of Lawrence Heights, it will be 5 women of color. Very important that their resumes make them professional women, because I really like to shake people up with who's who in TCHC. And because they're the developer, they're hiring a contractor, they're hiring an architect, they're hiring all the components of putting the project together, of course, using our 40 years of experience, right? Like it's not that we're working on their behalf. There's $150 million of profits that will be created if we're successful in redeveloping that site. The first place the money goes is to help people become owners. When they sell, the money comes back. When it goes into the fund it comes back to, which is Community Wealth Cooperative, a financial cooperative, it has to be used to go back into helping others in the community become owners, and 30% can go towards social enterprises that produce jobs for the hard to employ. So what we've done is taken the profits from development and are recycling it into community purpose in perpetuity. On that, billions of dollars that we create across the country can be redirected venture capital that can be redirected at racialized communities and Indigenous communities in a way that would never be done by a venture capitalist, because they think from other perspectives. So we're just creating our own venture capital, which becomes a community asset. And that just happens to be the scale that would happen on a 2,400 unit project. And remember, I said I was working on 10,000. So anybody who's good at math knows that I won't retire until I've set aside $1 billion. Not for me, what the hell would I do with $1 billion? You know, but sure as heck, the community can do a lot with it.
Sounds interesting. Thank you. Carla, you've been a remarkable partner for with us at Setsi, and what is your ultimate goal with Just Like Family? Do you see like a future for social acquisitions in Canada?
What's my ultimate goal? Now, like Mike and I are gonna do like a showdown of how big we can think. Oh no.
You're on, kiddo, you're on.
Oh no.
But you'll be around longer than me, so you owe more to it.
Okay. No, I mean, every single thing I'm hearing, I'm thinking in the same direction. It's this idea of the privilege that we have is how do we get out of the way? That's pretty much my goal. And part of that is in the social purpose holding company. What I'm doing is I've made my first acquisition. Within 4 months, I made my second acquisition. Oops, I didn't want to, but I'm already looking for my third acquisition. And I think what happens when you put your heart on your sleeves, when you put people first, when you actually make everything a win-win, and all the relationships that Mike's talking about of like looking for the right partners, actually using the existing levers for good is possible. And so what I'm looking to do is continue to buy more, but the neat thing I'm looking to do is take any of our impact investors who are individuals and exit them into employee ownership or into a co-op, basically takeover and co-op conversion. And so, yes, we have to move at this speed with impact investors' dollars today, and there isn't another way to do it, but that doesn't mean that those people and those individuals need to own in perpetuity. That's not the point. The point is actually making it a win-win and spreading the wealth and changing. Like my goal would be that every single person who works for any of the companies in our social purpose holding company are owners themselves, which means that not a single person is an employee anymore. Everyone is an owner, and putting capitalism on its head. One part that I'm looking at doing is actually, we're going to keep on acquiring because of the workarounds and the privilege. And yet, what does that mean? I'm looking for a percentage of all of our dividends for the social purpose holding company to create a BIPOC venture cap to continue to get out of the way ourselves.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, Carla. Isaac, I noticed you're back, so I'm gonna go back to you with this question on anti-Black racism. We just want to know, have you experienced anti-Black racism in this sector? How have you navigated the new social purpose real estate ecosystem as well?
Well, again, I've been in real estate for 15 plus years. Unfortunately, my dad's been in it as a broker for 20 plus years. I've been a real estate developer for the last 10 years. And I think for me, obviously, growing up in Woodbridge, predominantly Italian community, really for the last 20 plus years, really allowed me to build a lot of close relationships with the construction industry. So I was fortunate when I dived into the construction space and building the condo almost 10 years ago now. You know, I was able to build on familiar faces, those that I went to school with, their fathers, their grandfathers, and a lot of them really saw the same drive and energy that they had when they came in the 70s and in the 80s, sort of starting from scratch. In the development space. So I did get a lot of encouragement from that point of view. But I think, you know, going back to the last two comments on sort of what I would love to see is it comes back to what we've been driving, which is, again, institutional relationships, home ownership and small businesses. And I think the more we could have inclusiveness with funding and with allocation of properties, both from the city point of view when they're selling off properties to like Cratio or Toronto Community Housing, or the massive redevelopments happening in Jane and Finch, Lawrence Heights, Scarborough, Woodbine area soon, that they look at not only who is going to use the property, but who is going to implement the construction. Because to get out of any slowdown in economy, there's going to be billions of dollars going into infrastructure. So what we're trying to do as part of also going after those contracts is to making sure that there's a trickle-down effect of those who are actually doing the work. So we just launched a skilled trades training program where our goal is to train 1,000 Black youth every year for the next 10 years in all the different disciplines that are the highest demand construction side. So as we're building the homes, we're creating mentors in the space. And I love that we talked about the venture capitalist side because, just 5 months ago, we launched the first institutionally backed venture fund for Black tech founders, not real estate, but on the tech side, because we saw the gap in tech and entrepreneurship. And we want to take the lessons learned there and bring it on the real estate side where we actually have a lot more experience as well too. Because venture capital dollars is what's driving a lot of redevelopments right now. Getting access to pension dollars, getting access to endowment dollars, even if it's 1% or 3%, which is the population of the Black community. If that were to go into fund managers like my brother from Edmonton, then you'll see a ripple effect happening.
That's good. So can you tell us a little bit about your work with the BKR Capital?
Yeah, so BKR Capital is a $18.5 million fund. Originally was supposed to be a $10 million fund, but we got oversubscribed. We were led by BDC, RBC, TELUS Ventures, Scotiabank, even out of Quebec, we got CDPQ that came in. And we're excited because this is the first time ever institutions decided to lean forward with risk dollars. And I say risk dollars because venture capitalists is more risk dollars just giving out loans or grants. There's more care. There's more an incentive for the investor to try and open up more doors to make sure that you succeed than just providing a loan. So we're doing this on the tech side. And we're really trying to prove out a model that through investment dollars, risk dollars given to a community, you'll see more success. And hopefully we could transfer that lessons learned on the real estate side.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to go back to Adiola. You mentioned that you migrated to Canada like less than 4 years ago, and you were able to raise 4.9 million. You built 44 affordable housing units in Edmonton. What was the biggest barrier that you faced, and also what is inspiring you now?
I think the main part that I'll say the access to funding. I was new, so I didn't have the network. First I need to make a correction. We didn't build anything. We make an acquisition. So it was an acquisition, we didn't build. It was access to capital that was the main issue that we faced and we're currently facing right now. We got about 2 projects that we're looking at right now. To add to what Isaac talked about earlier, I think part of the ways to solve this problem, I think we have to think, especially the less privileged community, to look at land acquisitions and look at strategies like build to own, build to rent. This kind of strategy you can still take private equity money. It doesn't have to even be venture capitalist money. And you have a target for them. Let's say a target they're going to get out of the deal in 5 years. Give them whatever it is, you promise them. But you refinance and hold on to the property. And your tenants continue to pay their rent maybe for about next 3-5 years, and they own those properties. Those is kind of strategy we're trying to employ in the fund that we're going to launch in the first quarter of next year to help in terms of addressing this affordability issue, because the way, based on the statistics, it's going to take a very long time for most underprivileged community to catch up to be able to afford homes for their own, say, okay, I own this home, I own this house. So for us to address that, we need to think about this strategy of, build to own or build to rent and build to own. Rent to own. So first build it, they rent it, then you not turn it into rent to own. So this strategy, and it could be the money could be from venture capitalists, the money could be from private equity, then you can have government support, especially when it comes to having access to those land. Right? And you could get some good funding when it comes to maybe getting loan from CMHC at a reasonable pricing. So those are the ways I think we could address these problems as well. So for us, that's what we're trying to do in Edmonton right now. That's what we started with, the 44 units. We have another 124 units that we're looking to repurpose. Same purpose. And so that's the way we think we could help in supporting, in addressing this problem.
Thank you. I have a question for Graham. What opportunities do you see for the ecosystem based on the Emerging Social Finance Fund?
Thanks so much, Letson. I was going to ask a question for Adeola, and Isaac, and Carla, and Mike as well, and maybe others want to do this too. So don't let me derail you into but let me just throw the question out there in case it could come up at a later point.
Absolutely.
But, when we talk about venture capital, talk about pension funds, I think there are some amazing people. Talk about good people with good intentions. There are some very good people in those organizations. I don't think that they have the tools that they need to do what they would like to do with us, right? And by us, I mean those who maybe are coming to social purpose real estate from the social sector. And that's not everybody here, but we're trying to bring these two waves together, right? But the tools don't yet exist. To me, and that does actually tie to exactly the question that you asked, which is, to me, the Social Finance Fund will create a de-risking layer. So just so everybody understands what this is $755 million, which is to be released from Economic and Social Development Canada. It was to have been released this year. It now, we really hope, will be released early next year. It's going to 3 wholesalers. The 3 wholesalers are almost chosen as far as we understand, and they will then be working with intermediaries. And the intermediaries will be creating these vehicles that will allow some of these things to happen. So to me, whether the pension funds, institutional funds create something, or the social finance fund and the social sector create something, the foundations, we're all working towards this thing where this works. And by this, what does this works mean? I would like to define what I think I'm hearing here, and also share what we see as where this could be going. Right now, let me use the phrase ESG. A lot of public markets are riddled with this question of what exactly does ESG mean. We have some sense of what it means in environmental investing. And as soon as we got there, everybody said, no, you made it up. It's green. There's too much of this is greenwashing. And a lot of it got pulled back because it was greenwashing. Then on the governance side, you think, hold on, why are you not behaving like this anyways? These are naturally good things you should do. And everything that we want to see a company do got rolled into that. And I see that as a good thing, even if it's not there yet. When it comes to social impact, you started blending and saying this means good workplace habits, and you use good supply, you're not employing the wrong people in the wrong part of your supply chain. That's all exciting. But I've given some examples on my LinkedIn profile recently of things that companies could be doing with the S of ESG to directly impact social outcomes. I gave an example there, for instance, of an alcohol company directly supporting alcohol cessation, right? A drinks company, a sugary drinks company like a Coca-Cola, directly intervening in the issue of diabetes, which it is, of course, one of the primary causes of, right? So to me, public markets need a big solution, and they have so much more capital. Like, it's like a night and day. It's not even, there is no other capital other than those big, I mean, that's like half of our commercial real estate is occupied by these guys. So to me, if we could put pressure on them that they want to have anyways, certain actors within them, and help them. Carla already asked to swear. I would almost ask to swear as well. But there is BS, right? There is greenwashing. There's stuff, and we need the ability to call that out and say, no, what you just said there, that's not true. When you said it wasn't possible to do this, it's that you don't yet have the political will from your investors to do it. So great, let's get the political will, right? Because some of this stuff needs to come from that side. So to me, I would like to see this, and the actual technical social finance pieces here. We need more challenging conversations. We need to be cutting in on each other, and especially those from the social sector, meeting the traditional finance sector. They sound a lot like they know what they're doing. I'm more and more convinced that traditional finance sector people have absolutely no idea what we mean when we say social finance. They know the word social, they know the word finance, but because we said the word finance, they go straight off into all the things that they already know. They're not understanding some of these other things. And I don't mean that as a critique of them. I do mean it as an actual assessment of where the system is today. We need time to actually build that, and training. Sorry, I've had too much wavelength there. Just press mute. Somebody should press mute on me.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. This question is for Isaac. Do you feel that there's a need to validate and amplify Black-led intermediaries that are in the social finance fund? And how far is the Black community away from, being a Black-led wholesaler as well? Isaac.
Yeah, no, I think that's a group, and it comes down to representation. Sorry, I'm just outside now. And it comes out to representation. I think it's good what's happening right now, that there's the focus on the social finance in general. But I think the missed opportunity is if there's not proper representation across the board once the funding actually comes in. Because we've seen over the last couple of years, representation allows for diversity, allows for a different perspective, it allows for more productivity. We've seen a lot of the statistics from Goldman Sachs and a lot of the funds in the US. And I think as an entity, there's different organizations like FAZE that are coming together with the infrastructure to position themselves for wholesale or even intermediary. But I think it's very critical for the Black community.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to get into some closing thoughts. Can we start with you, Mike? What are your closing thoughts on the topic?
Oh, I have a fun closing thought. Because ESG triggered it for me. I had a meeting with somebody who's head of the ESG department for one of the largest banks. So I won't name him or the bank to embarrass him. But he said something that I've never heard from a banker in my life. He said, it's really hard to do social good with people that are just trying to enrich themselves. And I sat there and I thought, you've just dissed your entire client base. And so that to me is certainly a final thought. But I would certainly say that linking to each other, learning from each other's work is critical in this regard, because too many of our organizations are traveling their own route, stubbornly sticking to exactly what they're doing, when as a team, we can talk through ways of making each other more successful. And so if we can't let go of our egos, then how do we expect the private sector to ever let go of their egos? So to some degree, some of us have been around a long time, and we're willing to share, but we don't have the time to chase people to share with, and people have to chase us to share with us. And so that's my last thought that I'll put on the table. And I'm just sending someone my email, so that's what I do right now.
Thank you for sharing, Mike. Anila, can we hear from you? Your final closing thoughts? Adeola?
Oh, hi. Oh, sorry, Eddie. Yeah, I think for me, I think final closing thought will be we need to collaborate more. To what Mike just said, that we can't stay in our own silos. We all need to come together if you want to have a definitive solution to this. It's not something we want to continue to keep talking about, but we need to come together, collaborate, and actually, actionize this. We need to take action rather than just talk. So collaborate and take action.
Absolutely. Thank you. Carla, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is the time of the big smash. I think it's the time where we have basically like ESG is meeting impact investing, and it's coming together. And so there's like the middle is happening. I think that when you have nonprofit, social sector, the charitable being smashed with, capitalism and business, that's where true innovation is really going to start happening right now. And so I think it is the first time that this is happening in this way at this time, and the world will never be the same. I think we've spoken a lot about white privilege, about white supremacy. And I think one thing that I'm learning in this is that perfection is rooted in white supremacy and the idea of being perfect. And we're not going to be perfect in this smash up time. And the word humility that Mike used was really important in this. The rabbit hole I'm in this social purpose holding company is that it's not going to be perfect. It never will. We're going to keep learning. And so I love the collaboration, as that's why it's needed at this point in time.
Perfect. Thank you. Graham, what are your final thoughts?
I have an unusual final thought. It's unusual for me. And the reason I say this is I have increasingly been holding my faith in a private way, and in my work in the church. And if you want to come to my church on a Sunday, I talk about my faith very openly. But in a social economy context, I don't talk about it a lot. But I do actually believe that I think I've spent enough time with enough people who have a very broad view of faith that I've realized actually people are praying. They're not necessarily praying in the same way to even necessarily to a creator, but they're meditating, they're thinking, and they're realizing the answer here comes from beyond any one of us. There's something, where we could even choose to believe that the force that somehow created us or the conditions by which we came here could be appealed to help us get to the next place, because we're trying to get to somewhere good. And to me, to take a moment and whatever of those versions you want to call it, to say, this is beyond us, but we need help. And we need to believe that we can get there. And when we do that, we could look back at the other giant leaps forward in humankind that has happened. And I really think if we get this right, I mean, they're not only in the world, but in Canada, we should be able to get this right in Canada. Look at the conditions we have in this country, the wealth that we have. So there's my parting thoughts on a Saturday night.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it. And Isaac, if you're still here, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think everyone said it, but I think the big thing is representation, collaboration, and also institutions, large corporations who understand where marginalized communities are trying to go, leaning back and partnering up, and not just providing a service, but partnering up with organizations that are trying to make change. I think that's where you'll start seeing a ripple effect. For the longest while, institutions have tried to provide help and services to marginalized communities, but where you're seeing the changes is sort of pulling them up, saying you're a partner. You may not be at the same standard as a 50-year-old, 100-year-old company, but you're a partner, and we're going to help in building the capacity so that you can now build capacity within your community. And that comes through collaboration, and that comes through proper representation.
Perfect, thank you. So we're going to open up the floor for Q&A. If anybody has a question, you could just raise your hand. I do see there, Manel. We have one in the chat. If you want to potentially unmute yourself to ask the question, but I believe there's a question there for Mike. You spoke about Black women and women of color in the co-op at Lawrence Heights. They'd like you to share more insights into this. They said they're a part of the BWPW co-op, the Black Women Professional Worker Cooperative. And how could they be a part of the innovative real estate model? That question is for Mike.
Yes, and I've sent her back my email contact and phone number, but the beauty of development activity is that if successful, it creates its own resources to move forward at a very fast pace. And it employs a series of professionals in the work that it does. So I actually have a long list at this point in time of people I've met in Lawrence Heights, for instance, that I would love to hire. And so I'm totally happy to sit down and talk with the group. And because we don't need grants and subsidies, it means that anybody who's willing to learn and take the time to put things together in the same way can be successful. And so that's what I will be passing on in a more concrete form. Whenever I meet with a group like that, I check out what their resources are. Africa taught me a lot, and the most important thing it taught me was to stop and learn before I haven't been. And so that's what I intend to implement with everybody I bump into. It works really well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. That question was from me, so thank you. I'm looking forward to connecting with you, and I will take it from there. Thank you.
I am as well.
Thank you. Manel, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Manel. I have a not-for-profit, Our People, Our Community, and it's really supporting the Black community. So I'm very interested in this conversation. And can I say thank you for the candor and openness of this conversation. It's been really good. I know Adiola and Carla, you guys have both kind of spoken about, Adiola, you put it in the chat about the not-for-profit and profit commingling sectors. Can you speak more about how that works? And I have a second follow-up to this. Like, this has been really good. I've been a part of Setsi's 3-day conference so far. How do we have more of these with these kind of open conversations? How do we keep these going so that we know who we have to chase, and we know who we can, follow to learn more about what's happening? Thank you.
I think what I was referring to is for profit. Most of private equity firm, I'll use private equity firm or even venture capitalists, probably want to get out of a deal in about 5 years or 7 years. But we're talking about non-for-profit, we're just looking at providing services for people that, depending on what sector, let's just say people that are less privileged. So that ties back to what I was saying. If we could have a sort of collaboration, okay, you're bringing in capital for us to develop this for this community. We know that you want to be out of this transaction because this is your business model. You want to return money back to your investors. So we'll get you your money back maybe in about 6-7 years. Once that is done, the community continues to hold on to the transaction. So it's not a sale, right? You're probably going to, especially in real estate, you can refinance the transaction and get investors back their money, whether the entire money plus profit or whatever you want to call it. But at least the community continues to hold on to that property. So now the first part of it, you're going to have it you're going to have it privately managed. Then half of it, you're going to have it as non-profit. The fear of the private markets when it comes to non-for-profit is that it's nobody's business. So it's not well managed. Just like when you have affordable housing or government housing, a lot of things goes on there that's, okay, if we're to be privately managed, those things wouldn't have happened. And that is the fear of the private market, collaborating with the government on the non-for-profit sector, that is never well managed because they are not accountable to anybody. So if they have that kind of partnership for the first 5 years or 6 years, and you put in process and procedures of how a private person or private sector that is for profit is going to manage this to make it as efficient as, and deliver on its promise. So the not-for-profit sector will know or will just carry on without process, without procedure and processes in taking on the property or managing the property for the next, maybe 10, 20 years. But there has to be some sort of collaboration for that to work, because for not-for-profit sector, based on what I've seen, they don't know how to run businesses. They don't know, you've not seen them run businesses. If you were to be a private sector, you want to deliver on your promise, you want to make money. So it's being run efficiently. But not-for-profit, it's never run efficiently. So that's where the collaboration comes in, that the for-profit will help to, put systems in place to ensure that the business or the property run the way it's supposed to run. That's what I meant by that collaboration. And that will help us in addressing some of the gaps that we have in the market right now. Because no private sector wants to give money to non-for-profit, knowing that in 2 years, they're back in the market looking to raise money again because they've not managed the one they got about a year or two before efficiently.
I meant something a little bit different. So I'm going to jump in. So what I'm kind of seeing from this is that charities and nonprofits in their space actually have almost the moral, they should actually be investing in innovation, right? Because otherwise we would be saying that we're okay with today's systems. So we're not okay with today's systems. In fact, everyone's not okay with today's system. 65% of Canadians have said that they're terrified of today's systems. So if that's the case, then charities and nonprofits should be actively trying to disrupt that. So we should be investing in innovation. And I think instead of investing in new programming, why wouldn't we be looking at social enterprise? So that's kind of like the why, but then the how, what I think is really interesting on what I'm seeing as a social acquisition is that we have a competitive advantage as nonprofits and charities when we're doing social enterprise because we inherently put people first and we have a huge social network. We might not know how to run business or like we're treating it like a nonprofit, but we know the people who are professionals who know how to do all the best practices, right? So we have that network. And what I'm seeing in running a home care business is that there's not another for-profit business who can touch me because we're 51% owned by charities. We're going to put people first in every part of our business model. We're going to be more competitive than everybody else. And so we're also a better partner with other nonprofits because of the unique ownership structure that we have. And I think as I've been running my own company for 15 years, and I've been looking actually to sell it. Now, obviously you can all tell I have my heart on my sleeve in many ways. And if I were to sell my business to a nonprofit or a charity versus another individual, don't you think I'd give a discount? Don't you think that there would actually be this unique lens of being an accredited investor to buy something over? Plus the fact that there's all these other unique, as an accredited investor, as a charity, you can actually do some unique investments that an individual isn't capable of doing. So there's a lot of mechanisms that we just haven't looked in this way. I believe I'm one of the first for-profits to have a theory of change. But that's what happens when you start to do the smash up that I'm talking about.
Thank you for clarifying. Graham, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I just have a quick one on there. I think there's a separate conversation here on to what extent are not-for-profits and for-profits efficient. I think I maybe know what Adiola means, and I probably agree with him with what I think he knows he means. But just for the sake of rounding that circle, I don't happen to agree that not-for-profits are by nature inefficient. I would say actually, and neither, by the way, do I agree with Carla that not-profits are better at putting people first. And actually, for the reason for both is there. I think some businesses are incredible at putting people first for a for-profit reason, that they need those people. They need them to be healthy and working hard, and they're really good at it. And nonprofits can be very abusive of people because so often they're underpaid, right? And that's a big, big issue for nonprofits. But here's where I would maybe just offer you this. I think that wealthy nonprofits tend to become very efficient and very damaging very quickly for two reasons. One is there's insufficient accountability. So there are no shareholders for a charity or a nonprofit in the conventional way. And by members of a nonprofit, they're very different than shareholders, right? Members of a nonprofit may vote and bother people at an annual meeting, but at the end of the day, they're not taking home a dividend the way a shareholder is, right? A shareholder is at that annual meeting saying, you're messing around with my retirement, buddy. You better get to work, right? So there's incentive, there's accountability. And then within the organization, we're not sure what the product is. I think that's the big issue with nonprofit, and that's what social impact finance is. And that's why nonprofits and for-profits often don't understand each other. The for-profit has one product, which is profit, right? And you can be a good B Corp, you can, which of course does have a mission statement or a purpose theory of change, but still a B Corp is still the number one output is that profit. Whereas a not-for-profit, the question is, well, how many units of what did you produce? And that's where I think the social finance world is going to help nonprofits by giving them an incentive and units of a deliverable that actually for-profit people can say, oh, you're trying to create that many units of affordability at this amount. Okay, great. Now I understand you. And there's where we can realize nonprofits and for-profits, they don't actually use the same language. And social finance is a way of bridging that language. So sorry, this is a long intervention, but I think it is a bigger point. And it's, but sorry, there was the main reason I was going to say that is I think some of the most creative people in the world and bootstrappers are the new startup nonprofits. And I particularly look at the arts and culture sector and the poverty alleviation sector, where people just get stuff done in a way that would put many businesses to shame. And of course, they have the power of volunteers, which is there as well. So there's just my little shout out for the nonprofit sector.
Thank you for that. We appreciate
I wouldn't argue with that.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna take one last question from Juliet, and then we're gonna close out. Go ahead, Juliet, and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, so I wanted to put a question and a comment, and this is to the point that Carla had made, and I think Graham spoke to it too, in terms of the existing system. If we agree that it's broken, right, the capitalist model that we have, then perhaps we should be looking at expanding it. So this whole notion of a solidarity economy where everyone has a role, the for-profit, the not-for-profit, the collectives, the cooperatives, everyone has a role in this space. And then it becomes more about the values. What are we creating? What are those values? And I know Mike had talked about going back to these indigenous systems. What existed before that worked? How can we use the innovations, right, to build those systems to be stronger in such a way that the measurables, even though they look different, there's a convergence. So if you're looking at profit, you're looking at people, you're looking at planet, at some point, there has to be an intersection where we're saying, what kind of world do we want to build? And then we reverse engineer that to the systems and the institutions and, you know, the structures that we're building. And so just a quick shout out again to cooperatives. I hear Carla talking about it, Mike talking about it. I just feel that for Blacks, you know, marginalized group, we really need to think more around that, where we're coming together to own, to co-own that idea of self-determination. Can we, like Carla had said, those with privilege get out of the way so that ownership becomes something that's open to all, right? And then we're building because we have a stake in that business. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Juliet. I want to thank all of our remarkable panelists. We had a great discussion today. I think it was very fruitful. Really appreciate your honesty and everything that we shared today. And now we're just going to take the time to close and end the same way we started by, you know, acknowledging our original stewards of the various lands that we're all on. We also want to acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge those who toiled without compassion or compensation and many forms of racism. We want to acknowledge all the elders and community stewards whose shoulders that we still stand on today to build, share, and learn together, and for the collective liberation and sovereignty of our people. So again, I want to thank you everyone for coming, showing up, participating, especially our panelists. Have a great evening, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.